AngularJS has a whole lot of great directives. In this video, we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of them. So let's get started straight away with ng-app. We already covered ng-app. It bootstraps your Angular application. The next directive we're going to look at is the ng-on. ng-on will trigger some expression when some event is fired. So here we have an input and we have two ng-on directives. One is focus, one is blur. On the ng-on focus, it will execute this expression, which simply sets the variable foo to bar. And on the ng-blur, it simply sets foo to ABC. And that is this input. So let's test it. Gets focus, it sets foo to bar. It loses focus, it sets foo to ABC. Our next directive we're going to take a look at is ng-disabled. All it does is simply adds the disabled attribute onto an element depending if a certain condition is met. So here we got an input, it's a checkbox. We are binding it to this with ng-model, we are binding it to this variable click me disabled. And on the button, we have an ng-disabled and its condition is click me disabled. Let's go to the HTML. And as you can see, when we click true, the ng-disabled is set to true. So under the HTML, it will just slap on a disabled attribute. Okay, the next directive we're going to check out is ng-checked. And this is very similar to ng-disabled in that it will just simply slap on the check. I'm so sorry if I could spell today. The checked attribute depending on if a condition is met. So here we have two checkboxes. We can see here on the right, two checkboxes. That's all good. And when this first checkbox is ticked, it's going to bind its value to this first checkbox variable. And on our second checkbox, it will add the checked attribute depending on first checkbox value. Let's check it out. And there you can see when we tick one, it ticks the second one. But the second one does not tick the first one. The next directive we're going to take a look at is the ng-readonly. Again, this will slap on the read-only attribute depending on if a condition is met. So here we have ng-readonly, and it'll slap on the read-only attribute if make read-only this variable is true. And here we are binding this input checkbox to this make read-only variable. And we can take a look at it here. If we add here, Angular is great. Let's make it read-only, and we can't do anything. And our next directive we're going to take a look at is ng-selected. And very similar to the previous, it will add the selected attribute. In this case, it matters for a drop-down select, again, depending on some condition. So here we have a checkbox. It is bound to this variable select bar. And on our option here, we have ng-selected, select bar. So if select bar is true, then it will slap on the selected attribute. And what that will do is set our drop down to have that selected. We can see it in action here. Our next directive is a bit of a basic one. These two are exactly the same. We are used to binding with just the expression, third in a double curly brackets, but you can use this method, ng-bind, and it'll do exactly the same thing. So let's look at the HTML. Sorry, this is spelled wrong. And you can see they're both bound to this. That is it for this episode, guys. I'll see you in the next one.